Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Pakistan says the United States has messed up in Afghanistan by looking for a military solution. In an interview, Prime Minister Imran Khan said the only good outcome is that if there is an inclusive political settlement. Khan said Islamabad has helped getting the Taliban to talk to Washington, but it cannot afford to host any U.S. bases. Meanwhile, a Taliban delegation has visited China and discussed the current situation of Afghanistan with Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud has lauded Pakistan's role for regional peace. Prince Faisal called on Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. The Pakistani military's media wing said Prince Faisal assured Islamabad of unflinching Saudi support. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian man in Beta village near the Nablus city of occupied West Bank. Palestinian media says the army injured nearly 50 people in a clampdown on a protest that erupted after this incident. Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has spiked again with over 1,300 deaths reported overnight. The Latin American state also registered more than 41,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Pakistan has logged over 4,000 new cases, its highest daily toll in over 2 months, and 44 new deaths. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 195 million people. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. Pakistan says the United States has messed up in Afghanistan by looking for a military solution. In an interview, Prime Minister Imran Khan said the only good outcome is that if there is an inclusive political settlement. Khan said the worst situation in Afghanistan would be if there is a civil war and a protracted civil war. He said Pakistan will then have to deal with a refugee influx and there will be drawn into conflict. Khan said Islamabad has helped by getting the Taliban to talk to Washington, but it cannot afford to host any U.S. bases. He said Pakistan wants to be a partner with the United States in peace, but not in conflict. China says it expects the Taliban can play an important role in ending Afghanistan's war and rebuilding the country. A 9-member Taliban delegation is on a 2-day visit to China for talks on the peace process and security issues. The group, led by Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, also met Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Tianjin. A Taliban spokesperson says the two sides also discussed political, economic, and security issues. In a tweet, Mohammad Naeem said they assured Beijing that Afghan soil wouldn't be used against any country. He said China reiterated its commitment to continue assistance for Afghanistan and its people. The spokesperson noted Beijing also pledged not to interfere in the country's internal matters. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud has lauded Pakistan's role for regional peace. Prince Faisal called on Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. The Pakistani military's media wing said Prince Faisal assured Islamabad of unflinching Saudi support. It said both the leaders discussed the Afghan peace process and the evolving security situation. The army said they also discussed ways to collaborate for regional peace and connectivity. Meanwhile, General Bajwa said the Pakistan-Saudi ties are based on bonds of brotherhood and mutual trust. He said both the nations will continue to play their part for peace and stability. He also thanked the Saudi leadership for its support in Pakistan and its armed forces. The Arab coalition says it has destroyed several missiles and drones launched by Yemen's Houthis militia towards Saudi Arabia. The coalition said the rebels launched 4 ballistic missiles and 2 explosive-laden drones towards southern Jazan city. Riyadh said it is taking measures to target the sources of the threat per international law. This comes as the United States envoy for Yemen, Tim King, arrived in Riyadh to discuss the Houthi offensive on Marib. The United States State Department says fighting in the province is exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and triggering instability. King is set to meet with the UN, Saudi, as well as Yemeni government officials. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian man in Beta village near the Nablus city of occupied West Bank. Palestinian media said the 41-year-old Saadi Omar Lofti Salim was a plumber by profession and was on his way home from work. It said the Israeli army injured nearly 50 people in a clampdown on a protest that erupted after this incident. Earlier in the northern Jordan Valley, at least 13 Palestinian protesters were injured by the Israeli forces. Meanwhile, the family of a Palestinian man who passed away in Israeli custody has alleged that he was beaten to death. In Tunisia, opponents of President Kais Saied say they are ready for early elections while warning against an autocratic regime. The country is plunged into political chaos after Saied sacked the prime minister and suspended the parliament. The country's largest political bloc, Ennahda, has labeled the power grab a coup d'etat. Ennahda said it is ready for early legislative as well as a presidential election for the sake of the democratic path. The party also accused Saied of working with undemocratic forces to overturn the constitutional rights of elected officials. Meanwhile, Tunisia's foreign minister phoned his counterparts in European Union, Turkey, and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to reassure them. Foreign Minister Othman Jarandi said that he told them that the president's extraordinary measure is temporary. He said his counterparts also pledged their continued support to the fledgling Tunisian democracy. Earlier, Saudi Arabia affirmed its confidence in Tunisia's leadership. The Saudi Foreign Ministry said Riyadh expects Tunisia's internal affairs and considers the situation a sovereign matter, while the Moroccan and Algerian foreign ministers also met Saied in Tunis. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Abdenour Tahmi, a political analyst speaking to us from Paris. Thank you so much for speaking to Indus News, Mr. Tahmi. Now, Mr. Tahmi, opponents of the Tunisian President Kais Saied say they are ready for early elections, but they warned against an autocratic regime. What solution do you see for Tunisia's political crisis?
Yeah, I mean, as you stated out, it's really now Tunisia entered a crisis, which is another layer to the socioeconomic and the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Now, the president provoked this institutional crisis, which, has left all the analysts, to wonder, what's going to happen next and how he will process his this political move. So, we are in these days or these moments in kind of wait and see what's going to happen. But the latest developments are not that are really worrisome. And many people in Tunisia, whether political parties, elite, and even the people are really wondering what's going to happen to their peaceful revolution that has shaken the entire region 10 years ago. So now we are between two possibilities or two scenarios. So either the Egyptian scenario or the Turkish scenario, meaning by this, does Kais Saied and his entourage and the people who are behind him, it's interesting because there are some regional powers who are supporting his move, so will continue and push to the Egyptian scenario, which means a coup, directed, explicit coup, or the people in Tunisia, the political parties, the elite, and the human rights activists who have been fighting for the freedom and liberty for decades. So they will face these the president's moves and stand to his decisions, like the Turks did in July 2006.
Mr. Tahmi, the country's largest political bloc, Ennahda, has accused President Saied of working with undemocratic forces to overturn the constitutional rights of elected officials. What is your take on this?
I mean, yes, I mean, they are right. Actually, whether now everybody is blaming another and putting the blame on the NADA, which is, I mean, to some extent, and to be fair to this political party, the NADA movement is doing anything to maintain the stability of the country and to let this learning democratic process to thrive. So therefore, the other side, so who are like putting the blame on the NADA, who are the real obstructionists and the rejectionists to any move that will help the Tunisians, political leaders, and notably the president and the House Speaker, Rashid Al-Ghannouchi, to break through to the crisis. Now, and there is this kind of frontal clash between the two leaders, and like the late president Baji Qaid Essebsi, who was very kind of having this positive image and trying to help, working together with Ghannouchi to maintain the stability and help the democratic process again to thrive and break through the political impasse. So now the real question, because Qais Said, and we have to, not to forget this, he doesn't belong to any political party. I mean, he ran as an independent, but he had kind of large victory or comfortable victory in the election with the help of the Ennahda.
Mr. Tomé, do you see the international pressure on the Tunisian government as it has contacted with the world bodies and regional powers to assure them that the president's extraordinary measure is temporary?
I mean, you are right. I mean, that's a good question because, as we all know, the international community reacted timidly on this move because, besides, let's say, the U.S. is making a kind of vague statement. Okay, we will hope that the Tunisians will get their stuff together, and then we encourage the democratic process that started a decade ago. But it's still very timid, and so that regional powers like France, France, they didn't actually venture anything. In 2 days, they didn't say anything until yesterday. They started to send very soft messages, kind of rhetorical messages like, okay, so we will help the Tunisians to maintain their democratic process, and we look for the stability. But it is very interesting. When we speak here about France, is the usual suspect in the region, and also the other group or the other tribe in this region.
Mr. Abdunnoor Tomé, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now it's time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has spiked again with over 1,300 deaths reported overnight. The Latin American state also registered more than 41,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 195 million people. More in this report. The latest surge of COVID-19 pandemic driven by the Delta variant continues to devastate countries with lower vaccination rates. The International Monetary Fund has warned that the global economy may lose $4.5 trillion if the trend continues. Australia's New South Wales state has extended a lockdown in Sydney for a month. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reversed course on masking guidelines. The agency advised even vaccinated people to return to wearing masks indoors in areas where the virus is surging.
The recommendations and the discussion that we were having months ago that the CDC was basing their recommendations on were dealing what was called the Alpha variant, which is considerably different than the Delta variant. The Delta variant has a very unusual capability of spreading much more easily than the Alpha did.
President Joe Biden also said that his administration is considering whether to require federal employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson called for caution after new cases fell this week. However, the country registered more than 130 deaths, the highest toll since March. Ireland is the latest EU member state to commit to offering COVID-19 vaccines to children aged 12 to 15. It also opened its strongly subscribed program to 16 and 17-year-olds. Meanwhile, in Italy, hundreds of people gathered in Rome to protest against the Green Pass.
The Green Pass can be useful for abroad, but not for everyday life. Social life cannot be cancelled in a democratic country like ours. It is not possible that from August 6 it will no longer be possible to go to the cinema, theatre, museum, restaurant, bar, and to the gym.
Saudi Arabia says it will ban its citizens from traveling abroad for 3 years if they break COVID-19 travel rules. South Korea and Thailand have reported the highest ever increase in their daily cases. Pakistan has recorded the highest daily COVID-19 cases in more than 2 months as more than 4,000 people tested positive overnight. The country's health ministry says the infection count has crossed 1,015,000. The ministry also recorded 44 new deaths, pushing the toll over 23,100. It said more than 935,000 people have recovered, while nearly 2,900 are in critical condition. Meanwhile, more than 26.2 million vaccine doses have been administered so far across the country. Over 5.4 million people are fully vaccinated. The United States has expressed deep concern about reported attacks against Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia's Tigray region. In a press briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Jelena Porter called on Tigray rebels to halt attacks against the Eritreans. She also called for an end of violence against asylum seekers and aid workers who are trying to respond to the humanitarian disaster in the region. Earlier, UN refugee agency said 2 Eritrean refugees have been killed this month. It also said that about 24,000 Eritrean refugees are trapped in 2 camps. Fighting broke out in the Tigray region last November and has escalated since in and around the refugee camps. Thousands of people have died in the fighting and around 2 million have been displaced. The death toll from the recent heavy rainfall in central China's Henan province has risen to 73. Authorities say more than 13 million people relocated across the province. Officials said that more than 784,000 houses were damaged during the rainstorms. The downpours have also caused an economic loss of around $13.6 billion. In India, at least 18 migrant workers have died after a truck crashed into their bus in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. Authorities say at least 30 people were also injured in the accident. The workers were on a 1,300-kilometer-long journey to Bihar from the Haryana when the bus broke down. Officials say some people were on the bus while others were sleeping next to the parked vehicle. Police told reporters that the bus was overloaded beyond its capacity. It had about 140 passengers, while its capacity was just 65. In Germany, at least 2 persons have died and 31 others are injured after a fire at an industrial park in the western city of Leverkusen. The explosion caused a fire at a fuel depot off the Chem Park industrial zone for several chemical companies. Police said 5 of the 31 injured people were affected seriously and needed intensive care. Police said several people were missing following the blast. However, the Chem Park administration said the fire has been extinguished and the search for missing people is underway. President Joe Biden has warned that a significant cyber attack on the United States could lead to a real shooting war with a major power. However, he stressed the necessity to work with Russia and China despite rivalry. Biden made the remarks during a visit to the office of the Director of National Intelligence in Virginia. His comments highlighted what Washington sees as growing threats posed by Russia and China. In his speech, Biden said the ailing economy of Russia makes it even more dangerous. He accused Moscow of spreading disinformation about the 2022 U.S. midterm elections. The United States president also referred to Chinese President Xi Jinping as a deadly earnest and termed Beijing's rise a serious challenge. The World Health Organization says the tobacco industry is attracting youngsters to e-cigarettes, which can lead to addiction. In a report, the WHO rebutted claims by some executives that they aim to solve the smoking epidemic. The body says more than 8 million people die annually from tobacco use and exposure to tobacco smoke. The report called for greater regulation of smoke-free devices containing nicotine. In a briefing, WHO officials said they know e-cigarettes are also harmful, even though the evidence is not yet totally conclusive on the issue. Rudiger Kretsch said that e-cigarette users were at least twice, if not 3 times, more likely to become cigarette smokers. European stocks have gained over encouraging earnings reports from British bank Barclays and luxury group Kering. The Pan-European Stock 600 index rose 0.4% after 2 sessions of declines. The CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB are leading the gains, rising close to 1%. London's FTSE and Frankfurt's DAX have also gained marginally. The State Bank of Pakistan has decided to keep the policy rate at 7% for the next 2 months. In a press conference, Governor Director Raza Bakir said this is the 5th consecutive time that the bank has maintained it. Bakir said that the results were in front of the nation in the form of 3.94% economic growth. He said there has been a reduction in headline inflation and core inflation. But the central bank governor said there is a need to reduce this further. He assured that in an emerging country like Pakistan, the current account deficit of 2 to 3% of the GDP was sustainable. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.